Vanish by Annie Maria Miles. I tried to be gentle. I tried to come to you slowly, reeling myself in fragments of the glowing dimness of dusk. I stepped over so carefully into the downward cast of the yellow streetlight sepia light, sending forth first a finger, then a tentative but eager kick to Karena's hand. I moved so gently, so slowly, that I felt the cloak of darkness removed from my face, inch by inch, nose first, before there was no more hiding. I did this for you, asked not to startle you, didn't you see? I even smiled, those sparks of kindness you all boast so easily, like the one you'd given me, and yet you still screamed, shrieked even, a shrill shriek of survival, one of horror and fear, as if the very sight of me would be your upending. And how you ran, just took off as if the wind came and swept you away, leaving no blame for yourself. I offered you my most sincere attempt at kindness, an approach akin to that of a person who wishes to greet a cute puppy. And how was it that you repaid me, screaming and running away? Could you see how that would have made me angry? Do you understand that I had to do what I've done? All I'd ever wanted to do was to be with you, to be more like you. I just wanted to learn from you. If not for your outburst, things could have been different. I thought maybe you were different. I'd wanted you to be different. I'd hoped that you'd be the one to accept me, welcome me, and show me that it was like to be like you. A growing firefly in the night, leading me out of my solemn and lonely abyss. I thought you'd be unlike the others, who'd take an ill look at me and condemn me to hell with a snarl, thrust a spear of fear between us like a barrier. Me and them, water and oil, two things that could never mix. I'd hoped you'd be different. I'd hoped to be like the blood. I hoped it with all the blood pumping through my chest. I thought you'd see how much I'd longed for us to mix, and how much I dreamt of opening your arms wide, like I'd watched you to so many others around you. Even that bowling ball of a man that saw you squinching his arms barely able to stretch around your own belly and wrap around you, parked together behind your bedroom window. It was such a wonder to me how he was not greeted with you like I was, what with all the cruel things I'd seen him doing. I'd wonder how the fear would gleam in your eyes once you'd finally learn the truth about the man you let stay in your bed. All those dirty and lustful glances he gave to children at the park when you weren't around, telling you he had late meetings so you could take the long way and feed his devilish desires. Window, shopping the younglings as they played. Yet you did not look at him the same foul and disgusting monster he was. Instead, it was I with whom you showed disgust and foulness, a violent terror shooting through those eyes at my unevening this evening. You were certainly not how I'd hoped you'd be, just like the others. You saw my burned and battered face, the scarred and charred mask of skin I'd be forced to present. I saw the judgment glinting between your lashes, just like the rest of them. Monster, they'd call me, without even giving me a chance, without even a hello or a flitter of pity. Even, even that I would have understood, maybe even welcomed, perhaps that I was going to be missing. A sympathizing and tender outreach, a compassionate soul there to guide me towards the light. After all, darkness was all I'd ever known, all I'd ever seen, save for the blinding blaze of flames my mother tossed me into, spouting about how I'd belonged in hell for devouring my twin brother before he'd had a chance. I'd heard people say there's darkness in all of us. Perhaps I consumed all of my brother's when I took his life for my own. Perhaps we would have been alright if he'd not vanished before his first breath. Though, perhaps not. What with the mother we had, He'd gotten the better end of the deal, I'd supposed. And what my mother expected, she the tree, I the apple. For the years, I tried to be a good person. I tried to be anything but the sum of my scars. Tried to make friends, tried to reach out. You tell me how much of it you can take before he breaks. 1 year? 5 years? A decade? Try 3 decades. 30 years. Monster. You hear it enough. You start to believe it. No one gave me a chance. No one gave me the time of day. Just gruesome looks and disdained scowls. No hello nods passing on the streets or returning waves. No pleases and thank yous at the shops. Just flashes of fear and short silent submissions. Anything to end our interactions quickly. People saw me and saw a monster. So, I said, a monster. That's what you want? That's what you get. I decided I'd become the very thing deserving of those unpleasant greetings. I'd become the thing people always feared to be true, hiding away, seeking comfort in darkness, making nightmares a reality. What freedom, what relief to finally surrender myself. Mother would have been proud, I thought, though I never did lift the pillow to find out. As she wriggled and writhed beneath my arms, just a couple of minutes. Mother, you'll see your son soon. Even then, I wasn't convinced I was monstrous enough for her. After all, I'd done her a favor. Her death, my first, was much gentler than the ones who'd followed. The kindness I'd showed my mother was perhaps the bit that last existed in my body, or so I thought. The day that I met you and lived the remaining ember I hadn't realized was still burning, there was a weak and muted flicker of something other than darkness that remained somewhere deep inside me. Somewhere you were able to touch. Do you remember that day at the coffee shop? Your purple polka dotted headband, tied brimly in a bow, your hair pulled back into a high bun, with just a few curly strands dancing around the edges of your cheeks. How you had actually smiled at me before asking for my order, and then had you thanked me once I'd paid, wishing me a good day. There was no grimace in your manner, no hesitation at my mutilated face. You were so pretty, so kind, not like my mother, not like any of the others. How had I gone so many years without finding this perfect human? That this that is the most profound thing about darkness. Even a flash of light is enough to change the entire atmosphere. You were that light. So, there I was, still goodness in this world. There was still hope for me. Past be damned. You showed me that. And so I followed you home that day. And many of the days since then, I watched you. I protected you, like the rarity that you were. I tried to preserve your kindness, study it, waiting in the shadows for our next encounter. But when I discovered there was already a man in your life, I followed him too. I'd make sure you were safe, that no one was threatening your goodness, as if your light was already spreading to me, the way fire always does. I cared for you by taking care of him. There was no room for a pedophile in your life. He was a threat to you, a rapid of white waters sure to extinguish you. I couldn't let that happen. But after he was gone, you disappeared. The next day I went to the coffee house, hoping to see you, expecting to see you sparkling with relief and joy. But finally you were free. I did that. I'd imagined it many times, me waltzing into your shop, you ready with open arms to thank me. Me, your savior. You, my savior. Once you were not there, then, or the next day, or the next, where were you? I watched outside your house, lights going on in the morning, then off as the evening turned to night. But you did not leave. You disappeared in plain sight. You left me alone, locked yourself up in a house as if freedom meant absolutely nothing to you. Had it been one more day I'd there waiting, I'll admit I'm not sure I could have forgiven you for such ingratitude. So, you can imagine my delight when you stepped out for a walk this evening, the horizon still bleeding its last drops into the twilight, like a sign, you, my last dash of hope. Monster, they called me. They, but not you. So why then did you scream? Why such a vile and repulsive response at the sight of me, as I stepped down to the light to greet you? What had changed between our first meeting? I did not take you for flighty, and yet you'd made my breath go raspy and harsh in our chase, as if I were a wolf and you a delectable lamb. I'd only wished to greet you, to reconcile ourselves after unbearable separation, to refortify the promise of our union. That was the moment I'd realized it. Those endless, suffocating seconds. You were just like the others. There was no light in you. You saw me as they did, a monster. Imagine the anger, imagine the betrayal. I'd only ever wanted to be with you, to be more like you. But oh, how you'd fool me. You're much harder to carry to the car than I thought you'd be, and you certainly had a strong failure fight in you. I suppose that was the light I thought I'd seen. Because looking at you now, you lay atop my table. There's neither there's neither life nor light behind those wide, unblinking eyes. Story 2. The house is old. It made all kinds of sounds at night, in the dark. At first, Emily hated the place and pleaded with her parents to move back to the city. It was an adjustment, something she would have to get used to, which her parents kept telling her. They assumed it was trepidation that played onto her young daughter's anxiety. They had left behind most of what she knew, like her school and friends. They understood it was scary, but they promised she would come to love her new home and the school she'd be attending in the fall. It's so boring here. There's nothing to do for miles. No parks, no children. How am I supposed to make any friends? For a child, Emily had a valid point. Her new home sat on a parcel of land backed up to a thick forest and dense forestry. While Emily's parents found the property relaxing and freeing from the hustles of the city life, Emily hated it. The trees would groan when the wind blew, and the call of the wild creatures always came at night, slipping through the walls and making Emily's hair stand on end. However, this night, it was not the sound of groaning trees or wild animals that woke Emily. It was the creaking of her mattress strings. Her bed was old and made from an ornate metal frame, so it was not immune to squeaking in the slightest shift of the young girl's weight. But Emily knew this was different. Her mother had left the room an hour or so ago, and reading the collection of fairy tales a favorite family, and her father was away at work, so who was there? The cat should not return to the bend that would shift so much. Tentatively, Emily opened her eyes and peeked out into the darkness. It took her eyes a couple of moments to adjust, thanks to the fact that she was much too brave for a night at least. At the foot of her bed, she could make out a shape. The more her eyes began to adjust, the more her eyes could make out. It was a boy. A little boy dressed in striped pajamas, with hair, okay, with hair as red as Emily's own. Sitting up in the bed slowly, Emily rubbed her eyes simply to ensure she wasn't seeing things. She was not immune to childish nightmares. After all, she saw her mother checking under the bed at night for monsters. This boy didn't look like a monster. He was smiling and staring at Emily, his little legs kicking in the air. He seemed amused. Emily swallowed. Her throat felt impossibly dry. Her mouth simply hung open as she tried to find the right words to say, but the boy seemed to beat her to it. I thought you sleep forever. I was starting to get bored. He sounded like a year younger than Emily, friendly and perhaps impatient. Emily didn't seem to realize that her blankets were tightly gripped in her hands, half lifted like some kind of shield. All she could do was stare at the boy until the obvious question started to slip from her lips. How'd you get inside? Are you lost? A peal, and a peal of impish laughter erupted from the boy. His little arms wrapped around his middle as he rocked back and forth, still perfectly balanced at the foot of his bed. The laughter lasted so long that Emily expected her mother to burst into the room, but she did not hear the telltale sound of footsteps in the hall. Lost? I'm not lost, silly. This is my home, isn't it? This immediately surprised Emily, as no one had lived in this house for years. At least, that's what her parents said. They'd done so many renovations to make the house livable again. The house was barely recognizable when compared to its old photos. Emily canted her head to the side as if trying to understand what the boy said. This isn't your home. This is my home. My parents live here. Silence fell upon the room, the peal of laughter ending without warning, but the smile remained on the boy's face as he shook his head back and forth. For a child, he looked rather pensive, older than he appeared. His impossibly bright eyes looked back at Emily, his words sounding so sure, so final. This is my home. You and your parents belong to me. I always wanted a sibling. Didn't you, Emily? Cold prickling shivers danced down Emily's spine, her eyes never looking away from the boy as she lifted those blankets a little higher until she pulled them over her head, fell back down against the pillows. This had to be a bad dream. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Don't hide from me, Emily. That's rude. There was a darkness in the boy's voice now, replacing the pluckish lilt had been there before. There was a shifting on the bed. It felt heavier than before. The boy was moving, it seemed. A tugging could be felt upon the blankets that Emily held like a vice, trying to keep them in place. I want to play. Play with me, Emily. I came so far and waited so long. The tugging grew violent. This was not the strength of a child, but something else. Emily refused to let go. Her eyes screwed shut, so she thought she might never open them again. When the tugging stopped, there was, for the briefest moments, relaxation in Emily's grip. That was when the blankets were pulled across with lightning speed from the bed and hurled across the room. As Emily dared to open her eyes, she looked around the room, wide with panic, trying to see the boy. He was no longer at the foot of the bed, and she could not immediately see him in what little light the moon offered from the window. Emily didn't even dare to move from the bed. Instead, she brought her knees up to her chest, sat there, her arms hugging her around the legs, and simply waited. Are you scared of me, Emily? The question sounded like it was spoken right into her ear, making Emily jump. Scrambling to look around, and suddenly taking up her pillows as some sort of sword bit for slaying dragons. She still couldn't see the boy, but Emily knew he could likely see her. All I wanted was a family, a sister. Why won't you give me what I want? The voice had a sorrow that Emily couldn't ignore, but she refused to answer. Moment after moment, the silence grew heavy and painful enough that Emily finally brought herself to look around. There was no one. The house began its usual sounds. The trees outside groaned in the wind. Tentatively, Emily made her way from the bed. She gathered her blankets and returned to the bed and tried to sleep. Like before, she pulled the blankets over her head, hoping they would keep her safe. The rest of the night was filled with fitful and restless sleep. Emily woke at every sound, but the boy didn't return. Emily convinced herself that it had been a bad dream, nothing more. When sleep finally took her, it was not long before the smell of frying bacon and sizzling hotcakes seized the girl from her slumber. On the weekends, it was a tradition that her Emily's mother would make big breakfast, and they would spend the afternoon out of the house running errands. Emily quickly dressed, and her pajamas haphazardly tossed into the hamper as she left her room and took the steps downstairs 2 at a time. She practically skidded around the corner into the kitchen, eager to find her place at the table. "Good morning, Emily." Her mother's voice sounded like a salve after such a horrid night. As the words "good morning" started to form in Emily's mouth, she swallowed them down, her eyes staring pointedly into the dining room. The boy sat in the striped pajamas, and he was filling on bacon and pancakes at the table. He looked up from his meal and waved to Emily, who hadn't dared take a step closer. She felt a hand on her back, urging her into the dining room. Her mother seemed perfectly at ease and carried a plate in her other hand. Come on, Emily. You and your brother have a big day ahead.